So you're new to Warpforge and you're wondering, what about the Adepta Sororitas? Could they be the faction for me? Well, this video's got you covered. We're going to talk about the lore, cover the different warlords, look at the playstyle, including the pros and cons and some of the keywords of the faction. Then we're going to take a look at some collecting tips, and I'll make sure to go over the different key cards in the faction, including which order to craft your legendaries. Finally, we're going to look at some decks, both beginner decks all the way through to some pro decks. So let's dive on in, shall we? The Adepta Sororitas, also known as the Sisters of Battle, are a militant order of female humans within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. They are devout followers of the Emperor, combining religious zeal with fierce combat prowess. Their primary role is to protect the Imperium from the forces of chaos and heresy. Armed with bolters, flamers, and other powerful weaponry, the Sisters of Battle are organised into Battle Sisters, Celestians, and Canonesses. Their chapters are led by Grand Mistress and Mother Superior. The Sisters are known for their unwavering faith, discipline, and devotion to the Emperor. The Adepta Sororitas have 3 warlords. The one you'll begin with is Erika Luminas. Erika is the damage dealing warlord of the faction. Once you have accumulated 3 faith, her Fury of Righteousness really becomes great guaranteed removal every single turn, as you're able to do 3 damage. Note that you deal 1 damage and then 2 damage. That's important because it can get rid of shields and it can do additional damage to armor. Junith is the epic warlord of the faction, and Junith is able to put down extra battle sisters using her Leap of Righteousness. And basically, once you have accumulated 5 faith, she actually deploys 2 battle sisters a turn. This is potentially the most powerful warlord ability in the game at the time of recording this. Morvenn Vahl is the legendary warlord. She comes in with a beefy 40 health, making her slightly more resilient and able to go deep in the late game. Morvenn is the warlord you want to use if you're going to be making use of the Penitence faction keyword, which we'll talk about shortly. When it comes to the playstyle of the Adepta Sororitas, generally, you're trying to make use of the faith mechanic, which is unique to this faction. It's an additional resource that you can accumulate through praying. Units that have pray can decide to substitute attacking that turn and go into prayer mode instead. Now, if they do this and the prayer doesn't get disrupted, that means the opponent doesn't do damage to it, you will generate a faith point at the start of your next turn. Once, as your faith accumulates, this cannot be deleted and you cannot spend faith. You will always have that level of faith for the rest of the game. This basically makes faith a snowball mechanic, something that starts small but by the end of the game can be really, really powerful. And there are many cards in the faction that have extra abilities where you have the required faith level. We can see here, for example, that the Preacher says if it has 5 faith, it says gain a shield. So regardless of the warlord, most of the Adepta Sororitas playstyle revolves around trying to accumulate faith and then spending it to get a slightly unfair payoff towards the late game. Now, the Adepta Sororitas are quite an advanced faction. I would say they're not the easiest to play, and they are slightly underpowered in the early game, and that's an obvious weakness and a drawback in a game that relies on tempo. However, the way that it's balanced is that some of the faith mechanics, some of the cards that have big faith payoff, tend to be slightly overpowered. So the whole idea really is trying to kind of survive the early game and survive the weakness of the faction to try and overcome that and last out so you can realise the main strengths of the faction, which is the faith payoff. The main challenge though, and especially the thing that new players struggle with, is trying to generate faith itself. Okay, so when it comes to collecting the Adepta Sororitas, let's take a look at the legendary cards. Now, one of the best removal cards in the whole game is the Divine Intervention. This basically acts for 5 energy as a hard removal of the enemy troop with the highest attack. It's quite specific, it doesn't matter if it's in stealth, that's a very good removal. However, if you're able to accumulate 8 faith, this is an absolute game winner. It says destroy all enemy troops. For 5 energy, destroying your entire enemy board can it can essentially just win you the game. So I would say Divine Intervention is definitely one that you want to get early on. Now, on top of that, you've got the Rite of Restoration. This costs 3 energy and it says choose a friendly unit that died since your last turn and deploy it. So this means that in your opponent's turn, when he kills your units, you can basically use this to bring something back. Now imagine if that was the Triumph for St. Katherine, or an Exorcist for example. So these giant units that cost a lot of energy, you're essentially paying 3 energy to get them back. Rite of Restoration is a huge tempo mana cheat, and definitely a really good legendary to have. Now, I actually think that they have a lot of good legendaries. Morven is a good Warlord, although if you're happy to play Junith or Erika, which are both pretty good, then you could save your legendaries and get Morven later. I actually personally really like Amalia. Amalia deals damage equal to the amount of faith. Now, Amalia has good stats. You could actually put her down on 3 as a tempo play and not deal any damage, and that would still be a decent play. Of course, you have some silly turns and silly games where Amalia is coming down and dealing 13 damage to things, so it can just obviously gets better the more faith that you generate. The Hollowed Martyrs is a really unique card. You play this on your Warlord, and then every time your Warlord basically takes damage, it deals 1 damage to 2 random enemy troops. This is an absolute nightmare for your opponent who is if they are trying to win the game through building a good board, as the Hollowed Martyr simply shreds their board. It also has really good synergy with the Flagellant and with the Spirit of the Martyr, which does damage to your Warlord and therefore triggers the Hollowed Martyrs in addition to its own effect. The St. Celestine's not bad if you're looking for a beefy mid-range unit. The turn that you deploy her, she's basically invulnerable to the next turn. It's a bit of a headache for your opponent, but it is a slightly slow card. And I would say the Astrid is also a fantastic mid-range unit, able to put shields on all of your units that pray. So I personally would probably go for the Divine Intervention and Rite of Restoration as my first 2. Then I would probably look for things like the Hollowed Martyrs, and then Amalia, and then Astrid, Triumph, and then Morven. That's probably the order that I'd go in. I will say though, the Adepta Sororitas are quite blessed in that they have a lot of good legendary cards. Alright, that's cool. What about the non-legendary cards? Well, I think the first one to really talk about here is the Flagellant. So you're going to see this card in so many Adepta Sororitas decks because it's a flanker, it has penitence, which basically means that it can come on and not just kill 1 unit, but the area of effect damage that it's going to do, dealing 1 damage to everything, can just help clear the board. If you're able to ping this, for example, with Erika's ability or Morven's ability, you can end up doing 2 or 3 AoE just with the Arco-flagellant. Another key card that you're going to see in the faction is the Miraculous Feat. This card is so good because not only does it give you invulnerable, but if you've got 3 faith, it gives you invulnerable until the start of your next turn. Now just think, guys, the broken combos that are possible with this. Not only can you make your Warlord invincible for an entire turn, but you can even play a Vanguard unit down for cheap, like a Celestian, for example, and then stick the Miraculous Feat on it, giving you an invulnerable Vanguard. Basically means all your troops are completely protected for a turn, other than to the effects of stratagems. Superb and slightly busted card. Now you're also going to see cards like Cleansing Flames, cards like Seraphim in the 4 drops in most Adepta Sororitas decks. These are quite cheap removals, Nothing too flashy about them, they're just very cheap and very effective. Now, the number one key card in the faction, guys, you will see two of these in absolutely every Adepta Sororitas deck that you come up against, is the Relic of St. Katherine. This is the ultimate card. Do not try and play this faction without 2 copies of this in your deck. It is vital. As we said earlier, it's actually pretty difficult sometimes. It's one of the weaknesses of the faction and quite frustrating things for beginners when they're trying to generate faith, and it can be really hard to do that through the standard mechanics. The Relic of St. Katherine, however, just completely cheats that. For 4 energy, you play this card, and boom, you're already up to 4 faith. It's an absolute godsend, and when you draw this in the early game, you often go on to win. Outside of that, when you're collecting the Adepta Sororitas, if we go on to rewards here, and then you click on campaign, you scroll along and you see all the different faction symbols at the top. You find the Adepta Sororitas, this one, click on this, it switches to the Adepta Sororitas campaign as it says up here, and it shows you how many campaign points you have to spend. Now you spend those points working from left to right across this campaign tree to unlock various goodies. You'll get everything from cards to booster packs to crystals for crafting your extra cards for forge points. You'll even get things like avatars and card backs. And as you work your way across to the end of the thing, great thing is that one of the last nodes here you get a legendary card. Now I do recommend the premium campaign, and the reason for that is that on all of the spiked nodes like this one and this end one here, you will actually get not just one reward on the left but an additional one on the right. Now only people with the premium campaign can get the one on the right, and that often includes a lot of goodies like legendary wildcards, so I definitely recommend that. When you're first starting out, my advice is to pick a lane and get as fast as you can to the end of the map. So for example here, rather than trying to collect the top, the middle and the bottom lane, just pick one lane, go all the way across and try and reach the end as efficiently and quickly as you can, because that's where you get your legendary wild cards. That's the point when I would then say spend your legendaries, and that will avoid you duplicating any on the way. Now top tip guys, if you do that and complete all of your daily missions, it will only take you about a week to get to the end of the campaign, and in addition to that, when I click on the forge, what will happen is you will have unearthed enough points usually to have unlocked another legendary wildcard at level 10 on the forge. That means you'll have 4 legendary wildcards if you've got the premium campaign within a week. Pretty good going, huh? That should get you a pretty pro deck. Don't forget guys, when you first start the campaign, by selecting Adepta Sororitas and then completing one mission, that will give you the points. That will give you the points to actually go ahead and unlock the first node. And that gets you a free 30 card deck. You can do this for every faction guys. You can essentially get a free 30 card deck for every faction simply by completing one mission with the relevant faction symbol selected. One thing that's pretty cool as a passive benefit to having the premium campaign is on your daily login bonus, just for logging in, you'll get an extra 200 campaign points for each faction that you have purchased the premium campaign for, just for logging in. Okay, great, but what about the deck list, BJ? Right, let's jump in and show you a couple of examples. Just bear in mind, guys, that deck building is a large part of the fun of card games, so obviously jump in and have a go for yourself, mess around with things, see what works, see what doesn't. But here's a couple of examples that I've prepared. Here's an Erika Beginner deck to start with. Now, I'm really sorry, guys. I went and broke my rule a little bit in this deck. I did put one epic card in, and that's the Relic of St. Katherine. As I've said, guys, I don't know if I'm just so devout and so faithful to the I'm trying desperately to come up with a meme. What I'm saying, guys, is you can't live without this. You literally can't live without it. The sooner you get this card, it matters more than the legendaries. You've got to get this card. So I've put 2 of those in the beginners. Outside of that, though, everything in this deck is a common or a rare card. So that means that you'll be able to get those very, very easily. And this is a pretty good deck. It's got a few nice early game units to help you pray and protect the board. It's got some removal in the Blade of Faith, some vanguards, obviously the relics that we just talked about, and then once you've got your faith online, you can start doing damage with Retributors. Seraphims are bigger. We've got a Spirit of the Martyr if things go wrong. This gives you a nice AoE clear and has good synergy with the Arco-flagellant. We've got some pretty good mid-range units in the Dominion Superior, and the Celestian is our big vanguard, so this protects your Warlord and you can pray to heal as well. Quite a nice stopgap. Zephyrim are your big flankers, and then into the late game we've got the Warsuits, which are pretty good anyway, but if you do happen to have the 6th Faith, this also gains Vanguard and is a good way of finishing the game by continuing to accumulate faith once this is down, because it will basically deal 4 damage to the Warlord afterwards. Now, don't expect to get this off often, guys, but every now and again you're going to have these games that go late and you're going to have had your Relics of St. Katherine and you're going to have loads of faith and you play the Exorcist, and for 8 faith that deals 5 damage to the entire board. It's a lot of fun to pull off, just don't expect to do it every single game. Okay, so once you've been collecting and you've got through your premium campaign, you're obviously going to have a much better collection and you're going to want to look for something a bit more pro. Well, I'm showing you the Junith Pro deck. Now, at the time of recording this, this is, if not the best deck in the game, it's definitely in the top 3. It's a really, really powerful inevitability deck. If you want to know more about this deck list, go and see the Junith deck guide on my channel. I go over this in absolute depth, and my Alliance team member just got Warmaster. He was top on the ladder, and he was top of the Sisters leaderboard as well with this deck. So yeah, you can if you don't have Saint Celestine, you can play a second Zephyrim. I think that's actually what my teammate was running. This is just a flavor choice. They're both really good, but this deck is absolutely phenomenal, and yeah, that's what a pro deck looks like. So there you have it, guys. We've gone over the lore, the different warlords, the playstyle, hopefully some useful collecting tips and deck building as well for you there. I hope this has been helpful and useful to you. Let me know in the comments what you think. If there's this kind of content is the sort of stuff you'd like to see more of, then do let me know. And I'd also recommend going and checking out my Warpforge Fundamentals series, where I go over some of the real core basics, and that series will really help improve your gameplay. Another good one to check out is the 8 common mistakes for when beginners start playing. Definitely a good one to go and watch. Or maybe even check out one of these 2 above. Thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.